Hello, everyone. This is Ignace Audio, and this is Ignace speaking. Today I thought, for the heck of it, why don't I read to you one of my favorite childhood books? It's a bit of an odd one, but it's got a very good story, and I think you all might enjoy it. All 5 of you, that is. So, please note that this is a real book that I do not own the copyright to. So, please do not take this as an official audiobook, and please consider supporting the official release, especially if you would like to see some of the most beautiful illustrations I've ever seen in a book. So, without further ado, this is The Race of the Birkebeiners, written by Lise Luge Larsen, illustrated by Mary Azarian, based on the account in Håkon Håkonsson's saga, penned in 1264 by Sturla Thordsson. The Birkebeiners were the fiercest and bravest warriors that ever lived in Norway. They could fight on land as well as at sea. They could hide for weeks on end in the woods without getting caught, and they could sleep through snowstorms by burying themselves in drifts and putting their shields on top for protection. The Birkebeiners were the king's loyal men. They despised the Baglers, those rich nobles and false bishops who wanted to line their pockets with the peasants' money. The Birkebeiners, you see, were mostly peasants. When they went into battle, they wore no costly armor, just birch bark wrapped around their legs, and so they were called Birkebeiners, which means birchleggers. This story begins on Christmas Eve in the year 1206 at a small wooden farm belonging to the district governor, a proud Birkebeiner. All the folk at the farm had gathered to celebrate Holy Night, and the little house glowed with the light of dozens of candles. A bright fire burned in the center of the room, and a thick layer of straw covered the floor. Tonight, everyone, from the littlest herd boy to the master and mistress of the house, would sleep together in the straw, in memory of the Christ child born in a stable so long ago. The governor had just lifted his drinking horn in a toast when there was a knock at the door. Quickly the men reached for their swords. Ever since the death of the king a year and a half ago, the Baglers had been raiding Birkebeiner farms. But surely they wouldn't come to kill them on Christmas Eve. Grabbing his battle-axe, the governor went to the door and bellowed, "Who comes?" "It's Sera Trad," came the answer. "Sera Trad? Come in, you've frightened us." The priest stepped in and shook the snow from his cloak. "What brings you so far from home on Christmas Eve?" asked the governor. Sera Trad reached out a hand, and a young woman carrying a baby stepped inside. "This is Inga of Varteg and Prince Håkon," he said. Now the Birkebeiners had all heard that a prince was born 3 weeks after the death of the king, but they had never expected to see the baby alive. Surely the Baglers, who wanted a king of their own on the throne, had killed him, and yet here he was. "I have hidden them for over a year," explained Sera Trad. "But now the Baglers have become so strong in the south, and their raids so frequent, we had to escape, and so we came here." "You are welcome," said the governor. "Stay as long as you like." But even the home of the governor was not safe for long. Almost overnight, the Baglers had learned of their escape and were coming after them on horses. There was no time to lose. They had to flee north to Nidaros, where the many Birkebeiner chieftains could protect them. To outwit the Baglers, they would ski across the mountains to the east and head north to Nidaros from there. The Baglers would never imagine them crossing these mountains, for they were some of the tallest and stormiest in all of Norway. The small group would be leaving at the darkest and coldest time of the year, and they would travel when hosts of evil spirits roamed the land, looking for unprotected humans to snatch up. But there was no other way. They had to cross those mountains if they were to save Prince Håkon from the Baglers. Sera Trad, Inga, and Håkon went immediately to a small town called Lillehammer. There 8 Birkebeiners joined them, including Torsten Skjævla and Servald Skruka, 2 of the best skiers in all of Norway. Torsten was big and broad, with immense arms and legs. A red beard covered his face. Servald was fair and clean-shaven, with playful eyes. Tall and slender, he almost flew on top of the snow and easily kept up with Torsten's powerful skiing. For years they had raced each other for fun, and now they would race to defeat the Baglers. After a hasty meal of dried mutton, flatbread, barley porridge, and strong ale, everyone was ready to ski. Although they hoped to avoid battle, they wrapped birch bark on top of their breeches, pulled iron helmets over their skin caps, and fetched spears, axes, and shields. Inga made herself ready too. She put on a beautiful gold brooch over her long dress and pinned on a magnificent gold brooch. It was a gift from King Håkon before he died. Baby Håkon would nestle down in a sheepskin bag with the wool on the inside. Inga would carry him on her back. Last, they pulled out their long, hand-carved skis, slipped their boots into the leather bindings, and grabbed one pole each. "Come in, let us make haste," urged Torsten, and quickly, silently, they skilled off. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the mountains, which rose up in front of them like angry trolls. The Birkebeiners were glad that the priest, Siratrand, had decided to come too, for the only thing the evil spirits feared was the cross. That night they skied past farms, through black spruce forest and into the high mountains, where only dwarf birches and small bent pines grew. Towards morning they rested at a mountain farm called a sæter. Biting wind gusted up when they set out again. Soon heavy snow began to fall. The further they skied into the mountains, the faster and fiercer the snow flew. It blinded their eyes and stung their cheeks, but they hunched their shoulders and skied on. All day they struggled. When darkness fell, the storm only strengthened. They were high above the tree line, where nothing blocked the force of the wind and the snow. They could barely see the tips of their own skis. At last their guide stopped. "I don't know where we are," he said. "We shall have to dig a shelter in the snow and wait out the storm." "The storm could last for days," said Torsten. "Håkon will never survive. Let me take him and ski ahead. I can ski faster alone, and the baby must be brought to a warm shelter soon." "I will go with you," said Sørvald. Inga regarded the two men. Then she looked down at Prince Håkon. Since his birth, the two of them had never been apart. If she gave him up now, she might never see him again. Quickly, she loosened a silver cross from around her neck and stuffed it into Håkon's sheepskin bag for protection. Then she handed her baby to Torsten. It was her only chance to save her son's life. The big man took the child awkwardly into his arms, for he had never held a baby before. He strapped him to his chest, and then he secured his shield on top to protect the prince from the wind. "Go now, we will follow," said Siratrand. "If God is willing, we will see you again before long." The two Birkebeiners turned into the wind and pushed off, Sørvald breaking trail and Torsten with the baby following after. They fought their way through vast open snowfields, up and up and up, always leaning into the wind, always keeping pace with each other. When they finally reached the top of the mountain, the snow had become so deep it almost reached their thighs. Never before in all their years of racing had they skied so hard. Weariness had slowed them down when suddenly Sørvald yelled and lurched into the snow. His skis had hit something. Quickly, both men kicked off their skis and began to dig. They dug and scraped until they found the door to a barn that was completely buried under the snow. Once inside, Sørvald made a fire with his flint and steel. Torsten lifted Håkon out of his fur. He was so cold and white that at first Torsten thought he had died. But then the baby started to move and to whimper a little. Sørvald looked up from the fire. "Look, he is hungry," he said, pointing to Håkon, who was sucking his thumb as hard as he could. "All we have is snow," said Torsten. So Sørvald fetched snow and fed the baby lump after tiny lump to melt in his mouth. Soon a fire was burning, and the two men curled up to sleep, Håkon snug in Torsten's arm. In the middle of the night there was a loud noise outside, and the door burst open. In came the rest of the Birkebeiners, with Inga at the head. They had found the barn. After 3 long days, the snow died down. The skiers had nothing but snow to eat, but they skied on, down the mountain, and that night they reached the valley below. Here they rested before traveling to Nidaros, where the Birkebeiner chieftains welcomed them. Now, if this were a fairy tale, the story would be over. But this story is true, and what happened next is perhaps the most miraculous of all. The Baglers would not give up looking for ways to get rid of Prince Håkon. They started a rumor throughout Norway that he was not the true son of the king, and demanded that Inga undergo the ordeal of the burning irons. For months the rumors spread and grew. Finally, to prove that her son was indeed the true prince, Inga agreed to the test, and now there was nothing the Birkebeiners could do to save their little prince but except watch. The day before the ordeal, Inga and the Birkebeiners arrived at Christ Church in Bergen. All day and all night they prayed, while sentries stood guard around the small wooden church. At dawn the door flung open. In came the Bagler chieftains and bishops to bear witness. A man carrying the burning irons with a pair of tongs came towards Inga. She rose to meet him. Carefully he placed the hot glowing irons in her open hands. The witnesses grew still, and Inga uttered no sound. Slowly she turned around and carried the irons the length of the church. At the altar she placed them on the ground, and a nun stepped forward to wrap her hands with strips of cloth. If, in 3 days' time, her hands showed burn marks, she would be deemed a liar and Håkon stripped of his right to the throne. 3 days later, when the last cloth was removed, a gasp went up from the gathering. Inga's hands showed not a trace of a burn. In fact, they were even more beautiful than before. All knew they had witnessed a miracle. It was as though God himself had spoken to them and said, "Prince Håkon shall be king." Prince Håkon did become king. He became the most powerful king that Norway had during the Middle Ages. He lived to a great age and brought peace, unity, and prosperity to his country. His reign has been called Norway's Golden Years. And yet, it is the story of his rescue that is best remembered. Every year in Norway, and every year in the United States, thousands of men and women line up at the start of a grueling cross-country ski race called the Birkebeiner. In Norway, these men and women ski part of Inga and the Birkebeiners' journey. They even carry an 8-pound pack, symbolic of the weight of the baby. All who race it do it to test their own strength and endurance, but also to honor the courage of the men and women who risk their lives to save a young prince and bring peace to their country. The end. Now, this is Ignace, and I'm going to say thank you for listening. Please consider supporting the official book, and see you later.